I have learned that most people do not stay poor because they are unwilling to work. They stay poor because they confuse motion with progress and ambition with structure. That is a very expensive confusion. You can work hard for years and still be moving in circles if the work is pointed at the wrong target. You can be busy from sunrise to midnight and still be no closer to freedom if the hours are not accumulating into something that can outlive the hours themselves. That is the distinction that matters, not whether you are tired, whether what is tiring you is building an asset or merely consuming your life. If I were starting again from zero today, with no reputation, no capital base, no inherited machine already running in my favor, I would not begin by asking how to get rich fast in the theatrical sense people like to sell. I would ask a colder question: how do I build the first machine that can produce $10,000 a month and keep doing it without asking my body to suffer for every dollar forever? That is a much better question. People hear $10,000 a month and they imagine luxury. I hear $10,000 a month and I imagine proof that a person has moved beyond labor alone and begun to build a system. Not a perfect system, not yet a great company, just a system with enough repeatability, enough market demand, enough pricing power, and enough margin that it can be expanded. That is where real wealth begins. Not with the first million, with the first dependable machine. And if you want that machine inside the next year, you must stop living like an amateur immediately. That is the first rule. Cut your life down to a wartime calendar. I do not use the word lightly. Most people approach change like a hobby. They want to improve their finances, but they also want every comfort, every routine, every distraction, every social ritual, every little indulgence, every emotional escape route that kept them mediocre in the first place. That is not commitment. That is decoration. When a country goes to war, it does not say, "We will continue everything exactly as before and simply hope victory arrives politely between our usual entertainments." It rations, it prioritizes, it strips away softness. It concentrates force. A man trying to escape an ordinary financial life must do something similar. For 12 months, anything that does not make money, build a money skill, or protect the health required to keep doing both, becomes suspect. Not evil, not necessarily permanent, just lower priority. That is how a year becomes a pivot year instead of just another tired calendar. This is where people fail first, because the mind hates concentrated sacrifice. It prefers a story in which everything can remain comfortable while something new appears on top of it. That is fantasy. Something must give way. You may need to take work that feels beneath your pride. You may need to keep a job you dislike while building the second engine in whatever hours remain. You may need to live below your apparent means while your friends begin spending like their promotions made them invincible. You may need to say no to invitations, trips, status purchases, idle evenings, and the 1,000 little sedatives people use to avoid confronting the gap between what they say they want and what their schedule actually proves. The hidden cheat code here is embarrassment tolerance. People underestimate this. They imagine the bottleneck is knowledge. Often it is not. Often the bottleneck is the inability to look clumsy, small, ignored, underqualified, or visibly in the beginning. Most people would rather remain quietly mediocre than endure 12 months of visible awkwardness on the road to visible competence. That is why they lose. If you can tolerate looking unimpressive for a year, you can often build something that looks extraordinary for a decade. But that first year has to be treated differently. You need one scoreboard, only one. Most people fail because they have too many vague ambitions and no measurable main target. More money, better life, successful business, more freedom. These are wishes, not scoreboards. I would take out a notebook and write a single sentence on the first page: "By the end of this year, I will have my $1 month." That is a real sentence. It has an amount, a deadline, and a test. Either it happened or it did not. A good scoreboard clarifies behavior. If the scoreboard is real, your choices become easier to judge. Does this move me toward $10,000 a month? Or is it simply activity that helps me feel less anxious while nothing material changes? That one question eliminates a lot of nonsense. Now, once the scoreboard is set, the next mistake people make is arrogance. They want to build before they have studied builders. They want to sell before they understand selling. They want to brand themselves before they can produce an outcome worth branding. That is backward. The first investment is education, but not education in the schoolhouse sense, where you collect ideas like souvenirs and then do nothing with them. I mean operating education. You need companions for the year. A few books that change how you think about leverage, offers, systems, and habits. I am less interested in the exact titles than in the categories they teach. One category should teach you how people with high agency think about life and ownership. Another should teach you the actual required volume of effort, because the average person underestimates by a comical margin how much output the market often demands before it pays attention. Another should teach you the difference between building a business and building a job that merely traps you with more responsibility. Another should teach you what to sell and how to frame it, so that a buyer recognizes the value quickly. And another should teach you how to automate discipline, so the plan does not collapse every time your feelings turn against it. Read them with a notebook, not like a tourist. I read constantly because reading lets you borrow decades of trial and error from people you have never met. But reading only pays if it changes operation. If the book goes in and your calendar stays the same, then you have purchased vocabulary, not progress. This brings me to the next hard truth. Do not choose your first money skill based on passion. Choose it based on market payment. This offends people because they want romance at the beginning. They want the thing they love and the thing the market rewards to arrive holding hands. Sometimes that happens. Often it does not. Passion is an unreliable first employer. The market pays for solutions. If you want to create wealth quickly from a low base, you should choose a skill people already pay for every week. Sales, copywriting, lead generation, paid traffic management, video editing with actual commercial purpose, design that increases conversions, appointment setting, automation, closer work. Anything that reliably helps a business get customers, convert customers, retain customers, or deliver a result more efficiently. Those are useful skills because they attach to revenue. Revenue is what businesses defend. And if you help a business protect or expand revenue, the business will tolerate paying you. That is what you want in the first year. You do not need the perfect forever craft. You need a monetizable skill with immediate economic relevance. Once you pick it, practice becomes non-negotiable. Not content about the skill. Not more talk about the skill. Even when the hour feels unremarkable. Especially then, I have always believed repetition is where the world quietly separates the serious from the interested. Interested people wait for motivation. Serious people operate on schedule. That leads to another principle the public hates. Do not tell everybody what you are doing. Most people around you do not have the imagination to see you clearly in motion. They see the version of you that has already been socially settled inside their mind. When you announce a change too early, you do not receive support. You receive friction. Advice from people who would not trade lives with you. Concern from people whose concern is actually discomfort. Jokes from people who need your immobility to help them tolerate their own. I am not saying the world is full of villains. I am saying fragile beginnings need less commentary than most people think. A seed does not improve because everyone in the neighborhood comes to inspect it every morning. It improves because it is planted in the right environment and left to do the right work. Move quietly, not because you are mysterious, because you are still building the first roots. Now, the next piece is one of the few places where spending money early is often intelligent proximity. If your current environment had the ingredients to make you wealthy, you would likely already be absorbing more of them. So you must get closer to people who already know how money moves. That means events, seminars, workshops, meetups, industry groups, online communities with real operators in them, mentors if you can find them, and, when appropriate, specific feedback from someone who can actually see your work and correct it. The rich do not merely know more facts. They are surrounded by better examples. The old environment keeps teaching you the same limits, because everyone in it has already agreed on what is normal. To change what becomes normal to you, you often need new proximity. This is why I would rather pay for sharp feedback than for vague inspiration. Inspiration burns fast. Correction compounds. A good mentor, a strong peer group, or a serious operator who tells you exactly where your offer is weak can save months in the first year. Months matter more than comfort. Now, once you have the skill under construction and some better inputs around you, you need to choose a customer. And here I want you to be ruthlessly practical. Sell to people who are already buying. Do not invent a customer class out of your own biography. Do not sell to broke people because they resemble you emotionally. Do not tell yourself a moving story about helping everyone. Helpfulness without payment is not a business. Look for buyers with money, urgency, and measurable pain. Dentists, lawyers, home service companies, real estate teams, clinics, creators with monetized audiences, specialized service businesses, small firms that know they have a problem and already spend money trying to solve it. Not because these are the only possible customers, because in year one you do not need infinite possibility, you need specificity. For 90 days, I would pick one customer type and refuse to scatter. Specificity creates speed because it allows every part of the operation to sharpen around one use case, one problem, one language set, one offer shape, one proof mechanism. Then build the offer in one clean sentence. I help this kind of customer get this measurable result in this time frame without this painful part of the process. That is enough. No slide deck full of adjectives, no website poem about your mission, no philosophical claims about changing the world, one sentence, one deliverable, one timeline, one price. Then set up a way to get paid. This sounds obvious and still gets delayed by amateurs. They want logos, domains, tax speculation, perfect branding, a clever origin story, and legal structure elaborate enough to flatter their imaginary future scale before they have ever persuaded a stranger to give them $100. That is avoidance disguised as professionalism. You do not yet need prestige. You need proof. Make it possible for a stranger to say yes and transfer money. That is the whole mission. And then comes the most important early milestone in any commercial life. Race to proof. Make $100 from a stranger, even if it costs you $100 in effort, tools, ads, or time. Because at the beginning, your greatest ignorance is not whether your idea sounds good to you. It is whether somebody else will pay for it. There is a massive emotional difference between being told your service sounds useful and watching a person you have never met part with real money because they believe you can solve a real problem. That is the first true validation, and sometimes the education around that first $100 is worth far more. What wording landed? What objection surprised you? What part of the offer felt vague? What part of the process caused distrust? That is why I say do not be precious about the first sale. It is not the beginning of the empire. It is tuition. Track the hours, track the money spent, track what went wrong, because now you are learning the business rather than fantasizing about it. Once that first proof exists, document it. This is one of the oldest business truths in the world, and yet people ignore it constantly. Buyers are not merely buying your promise. They are buying reduced uncertainty. The easiest way to reduce uncertainty is proof of ability. I did this for someone like you. Here is what happened. Here is what changed. Here is the evidence. That can be a testimonial of before and after, a case summary, a specific outcome, or a set of deliverables that make competence visible. The first proof turns a personal effort into something repeatable. Now you are building templates. The pitch, the proposal, the contract, the onboarding sequence, the delivery checklist, the weekly update, the way you ask for referrals, the way you ask for testimonials, the way you close the file and transition into the next engagement. This is where a hobby starts becoming a machine. A machine is simply a process that can produce a similar result, again without requiring complete reinvention every time. And once you have any machine at all, the real game shifts. The game becomes distribution. This surprises beginners because they imagine skill is the bottleneck forever. It is not. After proof, the bottleneck becomes attention. People cannot buy from you if they do not know you exist. That is why I would choose one channel and become offensively consistent there for a year. Not 5 channels badly. One channel, well, email, short-form video, LinkedIn, direct outreach, paid ads if you truly understand them, industry groups, a niche newsletter, one channel that reaches your chosen buyer, and then daily deliberate volume. The public dislikes this because it feels repetitive. Good repetition is where advantage is built. Most competitors quit because they get embarrassed by being seen too often before they are admired for being seen well. You must survive that phase. You can make $1 million a year through one product and one distribution channel if the economics are sound enough. People complicate this because complexity flatters them. I prefer the thing that works. Promoting must happen before delivery in the hierarchy of your day. This is another truth people resist because it feels counterintuitive. The intuitive thing is to hide in the work. Delivery feels noble. Marketing feels exposed. The exposed activity is often the one that drives survival. So sell in the first half of your energy, deliver later, always keep the next clients in front of you. That forces operational discipline. Now, when clients start arriving, the next amateur mistake is to do everything yourself for far too long. People romanticize control when what they actually have is a bottleneck with a name. The goal is not to become the employee of your own demand. The goal is to keep your highest value hours focused on what only you can do well enough for now. At first, that is usually selling, diagnosing, and maintaining standards. The repetitive, time-consuming, non-critical tasks should begin moving away from you as soon as the math allows it. Not to a co-founder because you are lonely, not to some grand executive role because you like imagining scale. To a contractor or part-time helper who can remove the boring, manual, repeatable load so you can keep driving revenue. If the economics do not work, do not hire. If they do, hire narrowly. A good early hire should create several times the value of the cost, otherwise you are buying vanity. And if you cannot explain the task clearly in writing, you are not ready to delegate it. Ambiguous delegation is just delayed disappointment. Once a little capacity exists, productize. This is where many service businesses remain poor while pretending they are entrepreneurial. If every job is custom, every deal is improvised. Every scope changes because the client feels persuasive. Every price is hidden behind a conversation, then you do not have a business. You have a tiring series of negotiations. I prefer fixed packages, clear promises, clear limits, clear prices, a premium option, a standard option, a fast or done for you option if it makes sense. Clarity makes the buyer safer and the seller stronger. And pricing matters much more than beginners think. The first number people hear influences what all the later numbers feel like. Tiers matter because they make decisions easier. A premium tier is not only there to be bought, it is there to create context, so the middle offer feels reasonable. Stronger guarantees, tighter niches, better proof, and cleaner delivery all support higher prices far more reliably than wishful thinking does. If you stay undifferentiated, you will be dragged into speed contests, price cuts, and undercutting by lazier people willing to work for less. That is not a place to build wealth. Differentiate through certainty, proof, speed, standards, and actual buyer confidence. Now, once you are making money, here is where people wreck their future. They start paying themselves, like the business is mature when it is still fragile. The revenue becomes emotionally theirs too early. They buy relief, then comfort, then upgrades, and suddenly the thing that could have become an engine gets consumed as if it were a bonus. I hate that pattern because it looks like success and behaves like self-sabotage. Revenue is not yours yet if the machine is unstable. Cash is oxygen. And in the early stages, the money that stays in the business compounds. The machine, while the money taken out, usually gets spent in the old world of ordinary life. That is why reinvestment must become almost irrationally disciplined for a while. Every dollar should have a job. Buy speed, buy quality, buy capacity, buy certainty, better software, better systems, better automation, better lighting, audio, editing, design, or whatever improves the buyer's perceived and actual experience. Better specialists when they remove specific training when it fixes a real weak link rather than flattering your identity as a learner. Legal cleanup trademark registration when it is relevant. Stronger contracts, cleaner proposals, faster response times, Better onboarding, better reporting, better offboarding, reliability is one of the most profitable products in the world, because most people never build it. Customers buy your hustle. Later, the best customers buy your reliability. Reliability allows price increases without begging. Reliable people get renewals. Reliable people get referrals. Reliable people stop sounding desperate. That changes everything. Then comes a more advanced shift. You start studying how bigger operators in your space really make money. Not the slogans they publish, the structure underneath. And what you usually find is leverage, not always financial leverage, operational leverage, distribution leverage, ownership leverage, reinvestment leverage, network leverage. Rich people stop asking, how do I earn more time for money? They begin asking, where is the real value created? Who owns the mechanism? And how can I move closer to the ownership side of the equation? That may mean adding subscriptions or recurring retainers, so revenue stops resetting to zero every month. It may mean adding a premium layer, so the same customer can buy more without you chasing new customers at the same frantic pace. It may mean adding performance-based compensation, where the upside from your work is partially aligned to the measurable gain you create. It may mean building a referral engine so clients become distribution. It may mean turning a service into a productized service, then into a managed system, then perhaps into software or training later, if the economics justify it. The point is not to pivot like a distracted fool every time you discover a new possibility. The point is to evolve what already works toward stronger leverage. That is what adults do in business. They do not reinvent themselves every quarter because a podcast made something else sound exciting. They scale what the market already validated. By now, if you have done the work correctly, the next step is not more ideas, it is more volume of the right actions. This is where I think people misunderstand success completely. Business is much more manufacturing than art after the basic variables are known. Same input, same process, predictable output, refine the bottleneck, increase throughput, improve conversion, raise retention. Protect margin, that is the work, not endless novelty. Once you know which actions create results, your job is not to be endlessly creative. Your job is to increase the repetitions of what works and remove the repetitions of what wastes time. This is why the final planning stage matters. Success at this point becomes a question of constraint. Are you constrained by demand because not enough customers know you? Or are you constrained by supply because you could not serve a flood of new demand cleanly if it arrived tomorrow? Every business matures through those two bottlenecks. And the operator, who can identify the real bottleneck quickly and respond correctly, has a much better chance of reaching the next level than the person who keeps solving yesterday's problem out of habit. There is a further shift that only serious builders make. At some point, you stop asking how much a client is worth once and start asking what the entire relationship is worth over time. That is the doorway into more serious business thinking. A client who buys once and disappears is revenue. A client who renews, expands, refers, and deepens the relationship becomes an asset. That is why recurring plans matter so much. They stabilize the system. They reduce the emotional violence of starting every month at zero. They raise the enterprise value because predictable revenue is worth more than erratic revenue. This is the same logic that makes subscription businesses, service retainers, software plans, and long-term contracts so attractive. They convert one-time selling into continuing economics. Once you understand that, your whole posture changes. You stop trying to collect transactions and begin trying to build streams. That is where the phrase "get rich fast" begins to lose its childish meaning and gains a more serious one. Fast does not mean magical. Fast means you stop wasting years on structures that can never scale and start building one that can. Now, let me say something about standards. Most markets are less competitive than people, not because there are fewer players, but because so many players are lazy, unstructured, slow, informal, and sloppy. They do not respond quickly. They miss appointments. They overpromise. Their proposals are ugly. Their communication is weak. Their onboarding is confusing. Their follow-up is pathetic. Their delivery is inconsistent. In a world like that, professionalism itself becomes a moat. Be the adult. Be clear. Be on time. Answer first, follow up twice as much as feels natural. Make the buying process easier, make the working relationship calmer. Most people are not losing because they lack talent. They are losing because they make the customer feel slightly unsafe. That feeling costs more revenue than bad logos ever will. If a customer feels safe with you, they stop negotiating so hard. They renew. They refer. They tolerate small mistakes because the underlying trust is strong. That is one reason reputation compounds. It lowers friction everywhere. This brings me to the final truth I want you to understand. A first $10,000 month is not the finish line. It is the beginning of self-respect, not emotional self-respect. Economic self-respect. It proves that you can create value in the market. Package it, distribute it, sell it, deliver it, and repeat it. That changes how you see yourself forever. Now you are no longer waiting to be chosen by a salary alone. You have built a second line of power. That is what makes the first machine so important. Once one machine exists, more become imaginable. But be careful. The first proof of success often tempts people into the next big mistake, which is loosening discipline right when discipline becomes most valuable. They celebrate too early. They expand their fixed costs. They hire beyond the math. They diversify into side ideas because success made them curious in the wrong direction. They let the original machine starve while chasing the identity of being a founder, a visionary, or an empire builder. Do not do that. Guard the first machine until it becomes boringly strong. Then grow. This is how, not by loud pivots, by compounding what the market already validated. Now let us be honest about the timeline, because people deserve honesty more than hype. You may make meaningful money near the end of the first year. That is possible. You may even hit the first $10,000 month. But you are not done. At 3 years, if you stay serious, it will finally feel like you are on. At 7 years, many outsiders will call you an overnight success, because outsiders always arrive late to the story. At 10 years, if you kept building and reinvesting instead of emotionally cashing out, the machine may finally feel solid enough that you are no longer negotiating with survival every day. That is much closer to the truth, and it is still a wonderful deal, because the time was going to. You can pass it building a system that compounds, or you can pass it getting older inside a life whose economics never actually improved. I know which bargain I prefer. So if I were beginning again, I would make the year plain: one scoreboard, one money skill, one customer type for the first 90 days, one offer, one proof goal, one distribution channel, one hiring rule, one reinvestment rule, one clear understanding that the first year is for building the first engine, not for performing success. That is enough. It is more than enough. People keep asking for secrets when what they really need is concentration. The secret is not hidden. It is merely unattractive to the part of the mind that wants comfort, applause, and variety before it has earned them. Cut away the noise. Choose the marketable skill. Get close to competence. Sell to buyers with money. Race to your first proof. Document it, promote daily. Hire away the repetitive drag, productize. Raise the standard. Reinvest hard, study, leverage. Scale what works. That is how you build the first engine. And once the first engine exists, the rest of life starts changing in ways that are difficult to explain to people who still sell their whole days 1 hour at a time. Because now the system can work while you sleep. Not perfectly, not forever without maintenance, but enough that you are no longer asking whether escape is possible. You are asking how large the machine can become. That is a far better question, and it begins the way most real changes begin.